everyone, I'm Rincey and this is Rincey Reads. Today I'm going to be talking about Katabasis by R.F. Kuang. So in case you somehow have not heard about this book yet, this is R.F. Kuang's latest book. It is another fantasy book that some people are calling dark academia. I would not. But you are following this character named Alice Law, who is in grad school studying magic, but it's magic with a K at the end, at Cambridge. And she has basically spent her entire life focused on this specific degree, working with this professor, Jacob Grimes, who is known for being just really terrible. And so Alice has worked really hard to work with him, and to become one of the best people in this field, when all of a sudden Jacob Grimes ends up dying, and it is partially Alice's fault. And so she decides that she is going to enter hell in order to bring him back to life, so that way she can finish her degree and get the career that she's dreamed of. However, her academic rival Peter has thought and planned to do the exact same thing, and so he shows up when Alice is entering hell and goes with her. And so the two of them together go on this quest or adventure to basically search hell and find their professor and bring him back to life. So that is the basic high level summary of this book. I feel like everyone has read this book this year, and so I don't know how necessary that was for people, but like I said, a lot of people read this book. A lot of people have very strong opinions about this book, and so I read it as well because I like R.F. Kuang. I read the first book in the Poppy War series and really enjoyed it, but I did not enjoy the second book in the series. I ended up just giving up on that and then just giving up on the series in general. But I did read Babel, and I did really like Babel, and so I was really excited to pick this one up because I do like her writing style. I really like the stuff that she explored in Babel, and I do consider that one a dark academia book. This one is honestly not really that dark at all. There's some sections and chapters that explore some darker things, but I feel like this book is pretty light in tone, honestly. I think a lot of people who have complained about this book have complained about the fact that this is marketed as dark academia, but it's not really dark academia. And I think that that's a fair critique of it, in the sense of the marketing didn't line up with what this book actually is doing. My experience with this book was leaning more towards the positive side, but I honestly had a really mixed experience while reading this book. I started off really enjoying this book, and I really enjoyed the premise of it. So I was very excited to jump into this one. And I think it gets to a very strong start with the way that they explain sort of the world and what's going on and what's happening and who these two main characters are that you're going to be following. But I think that some of the choices that R.F. Kuang made for this book just don't really work for me as a reader. One of the things I was really interested in is the fact that this book talks about all of these different views of hell from different cultures and religions and all these different things that these characters have studied in order to understand as much as they possibly can what they might be getting themselves into. And so I found that really interesting, and I liked the way that she explored those ideas. However, it seems like the main version of hell that you know about from Dante's Inferno, with the different levels for the different types of sins and stuff like that, is basically just the one that's explored the most, I feel in the course of this story. And I was kind of hoping that maybe some other ones would be incorporated more than they were. There are some ways that some of this is incorporated, but it felt pretty small in my opinion. And then the other thing that didn't really work as well for me is that you have these different sections of hell for different sins, and the way that it's explained in this world is that the people who are condemned for those specific sins are have to basically pass some sort of test or do some sort of thing in order to move forward and move ahead in the afterlife. And so when that's first presented, it also makes it sound like the characters themselves have to go through different tests and trials in order to get through the different levels of hell. But that's not what it is. Instead of being a descent down, Dante's Inferno kind of is set up, it just feels like they're walking through a path that's relatively straightforward, because they very quickly realize because they're not condemned to hell, they entered it like kind of willingly, like those rules don't actually apply to them, so they like just enter these areas and they just kind of like explore for a little bit and then they just walk out. And it feels kind of anticlimactic in my opinion. Like, the book is called Katabasis, and according to the marketing material, like I could be wrong about this, that's like an ancient Greek work that has to do with like a hero's descent into the underworld. And so I thought like the descent and the journey would be a very big part of the story. And like it is a part of the story, but it felt like the trials that you would typically expect in a situation like this just didn't really feel like trials a lot of the times. Like, they do go through difficult circumstances and do have to like problem solve to be vague about it, but I think I was wanting more of that in this book than you actually get. Kuang also does a lot of explaining for the reader, for anyone who like doesn't have a background in these like stories, these ideas. There's a lot of musings around like philosophy and math stuff, which, like, as someone who only has like a very bare minimal understanding of some of these things, like I did appreciate to a certain degree, but I also think that there were points where it started to get like heavy-handed, or heavy-handed isn't the right word, but it started to become too much of the book that didn't feel like necessarily needed or relevant. It's like when you have a friend who's like very nerdily into something a whole lot and knows a lot about like the history and the backstory and the lore and the canon and all of these different things, and when they're trying to when you ask them a question about something, it ends up being like a 30-minute conversation with them because they give you so much more than you needed to know. That's what this book felt like sometimes to me. And so for me personally, like some of those sections I just started to skim it because you don't really need to know that stuff in order to know what's going on in the plot and things like that. It felt like Kuang had a lot of information in her head that she has learned, whether purposefully for this book or for other reasons, and it felt like she wanted to use that information in this book, but I don't know if it necessarily helped the book. There's also a lot of this book that just talks about the like pain of being in grad school and like trying to get your doctorate and things like that, which is very like just upfront about how terrible it can be. And so I feel like that's a your mileage may vary sort of situation where like, do you actually care about that or not? Because I can see people reading this and being like, this is a very privileged sort of complaint, and it like putting people off of this book. I feel like what I ended up giving this book was like a 3-star because there are parts of this book I really enjoyed. Like, I liked Alice a lot as a character. She's a very flawed character that I think a lot of people are going to see as like unlikable. She has a lot of like thoughts and opinions in the book that are like problematic, to be frank, but I think they're problematic on purpose because you can see sort of like how the different like prejudices towards her as a person has like shaped her into also having like similar prejudices towards other people, specifically like women and things like that. Alice has had some like things happen to her that you find out about over the course of the book, and you can see that like she's still like slightly traumatized from those things and has like certain views and certain opinions because of that trauma. But I also found that the way things resolved was like just kind of fine. Like, I didn't really love the end sections, I think partially because like in the middle section it really starts to get dragged down, and so by the time I was getting to like the conclusion of stuff, I could feel myself worn, and so it just kind of like ends and I'm like, all right, I guess that was it. So yeah, I don't know, it's like one of those books where I think it's for a very specific audience. But yeah, there's just like a lot of things that I really loved in Babel that like this book is not doing that. And so like Babel to me was like exactly what I like in Dark Academia. It has the academia part as like a main part of the storyline. It follows a character's growth over the course of the book and like has like some sort of commentary and things like that. And this book was doing that, but for some reason it didn't feel as like finished or polished as Babel did. I think again, like too much of the book was spent just sort of like talking about like all of these different like theories and ideas, both in like philosophy and math and religion and all of these different things. So too many of the pages were taken up by that and not enough was dedicated to like the actual story itself. I think that like this book could have been like a 400-page book as opposed to a almost 600-page book or something like that. And it probably, in my opinion, would have been a stronger novel. But yeah. complicated feelings overall. I'll still keep reading R.F. Kuang stuff because I do enjoy it overall, but this one was just like a little bit of a disappointment after enjoying Babel so much. So yeah, those are my quick thoughts on Katabasis. Let me know down in the comments below if you read this book, what your thoughts were on it, because I know a lot of people have read this book. Or if you have any questions, feel free to leave that down in the comment section. I'll try my best to answer them as I can. So yeah, that's all I have for now, and thanks for watching.